What is the most concerning thing you've seen in youth sport development these days?
Um, for me, I would say the lack of athletes, you know, probably doing stuff on their own. I think there's an extreme trend of young athletes and parents who believe they have to outsource all athletic development to other people to help their kids. Um, I'm 39 years old. I'm not necessarily ancient yet, but um, I've seen a lot, and I experienced a lot. And, I think back in when my generation was younger, that there was and it wasn't always necessarily a father son thing. It was a mother son, mother daughter, father daughter, neighbor son um, dynamic that really helped athletes develop a lot better than they are now and for them to sustain in the long haul. Um, and I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in, you probably did this growing up, just going down in your basement, bringing your basketball or going in your garage. Like, I mean, I can remember vividly in 1996, I would have been 10 years old, bringing my basketball to my basement. I asked my mom for two CDs for Christmas. One was Puff Daddy, No Way Out. I don't condone what he did, but he did make good music at the time. And then Will Smith, Getting Jiggy with It. And they would just play on repeat. And I was just in my basement, dribbling a ball, right? Doing calf raises on my steps as a little, young 10-year-old. And the unique thing is my thought process was I want to be good. And I envisioned everybody else doing that at that time. And I think that's a trait a lot of athletes have, especially at young ages, right? A fear of getting outworked by other people, you know, wondering if your competition is what they're doing. And that's something that I always wondered, right? And it wasn't even necessarily the other teams I was going to play, went to a small school. I'm thinking, are the kids in my grade doing this right now? Right? If a kid in my grade, and I was fortunate, a lot of kids in my era at my school were very serious about sports, which ultimately made me take it a lot more serious too. So maybe that's why I was kind of brainwashed in a way to feel like I needed to do more. But yeah, I think that that's something that kids could really benefit from. And I think parents implementing that at home, um, could really help athletes develop without paying a ton of money, without signing your kid up for this. And I'm in the business to make money off of kids in this way, right? I mean, my business, fortunately, we have a lot of little kids who train. We love training little kids, and I think it's really beneficial for them to come once, twice a week and work on skills maybe their parents can't have them do. But like every parent can have their kid go. And my dad, used to make me do this, which is maybe a testament to why I could always had really good hand-eye coordination. He would just have a rubber ball and throw it up against the wall and catch it 50 times with my right, 50 times with my left, right? Things like that. Every parent, every grandparent knows those things, right? And they know that can be beneficial. And I think that you could just save a lot of money that way. And I also think it's a great thing for the kid to spend time with their loved ones doing that. And like I referenced when you first asked me that question about, I said parents and I said neighbors. Like there would be times where my neighbor, my dad, he loved working with me. I would wait at home when he would pull into the driveway, whatever sports season it was, I'd have our gloves out. I'd have the football out. I'd have basketball out, And I tweeted this the other day, I thought it was normal for every kid to practice for an hour before they went to practice. I literally, because my dad told me everybody's practicing, you got to do the drills that you're going to do at practice now so you're better at them. So then you can showcase to your coach that you can do the drills good. So then you give yourself the chance to play. But there'd be times where my dad would have to work late or whatever. And I'd go knock on my neighbor's door and he would throw me the football. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it the way that things are now are bad. Athletes are better than ever. We're obviously barking up the right tree in a lot of our development in terms of strength and conditioning, sports performance, getting them around a lot of coaches. But I do think there's definitely a lack of stuff that you do at home.
It's funny you mentioned the throwing the ball off the wall. Literally to this day, between every single set I do, I will catch 20 tennis balls just off the wall. I will throw the ball off the wall and just like play wall ball with myself.
Yeah.
There's this element of free play that young athletes that I fear aren't getting. Everything is so constructed in perfect scenarios, and there's this lack of chaos. Growing up, I remember playing on all kinds of different size hoops and just learning how to spin the ball off of different surfaces to try and get it into the hoop.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things I've ever seen, Kyrie Irving. Now, clearly, I'm not Kyrie Irving, but people will ask him, "How did you learn to like spin the ball and be able to score from all these different areas?" He grew up with a hole in his backboard and he
Mhm.
didn't have the money to replace it. So he had to learn how to spin a ball off of a broken backboard in order to get it into the hoop, which clearly has paid dividends. Now, clearly he's an elite level athlete, athleticism, but those types of free play are missing from some of the younger generation. Fewer kids are playing outside. Fewer kids are outside playing rundown or just doing kid type things with sports with balls. Everything is so constructed in a perfect manner that I think restricts the development of athletes in the long haul.
Yeah, and as a defense, a lot of it's because what they have as an alternative, whether it's our phones, our iPads, and our video games, our movies, are good as hell. You know what I mean? Like when I was growing up, man, like you could only play your Sega for so long. Like you couldn't make friends with people on the internet and play with all day long with your buddies and stuff like that, right? You couldn't watch whatever episode you wanted to of Ninja Turtles and just find it. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't even listen to the songs you barely wanted to listen to with, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that as parents, as coaches for young athletes, parents, grandparents, anybody who's in a young kid's life, you have to really make it enticing to do these things. My neighborhood has a ton of kids that play outside. I'm really happy with the way it is. Like they're outside literally all day. And I think it's going to really help them moving forward. And that, when you, like you said, you play basketball, you might be playing basketball in a hoop that's 9'9", with a ball with not a lot of grip, and you're just playing basketball, but you're actually working on things in an uncontrolled environment that can help you when you do play basketball again with a ball with tread on it and on a 10-foot hoop. Right. Same thing with baseball. You might not be able to use the same perfect bat for you every time. It might be too heavy. It might be too light. Football, the ball might be too small or too not inflated. And by catching balls like that or using bats that are too heavy, you're developing athletic traits that are not what you normally would do, but what they can drastically help you when you are back in the field of play doing something with your own equipment. And I'm a big believer in that. Playing on a field that's really short that you can hit home runs out of very easily, right? That can teach you something different about how you even stand or different things like that. And I think that those are the only way to acquire those skills is by putting people or kids going to that environment in a natural state and accomplishing those things on their own, right? And so much of that has to be done by parents giving them, I don't want to say, making it more enticing, but even for guys like us who have kids, like doing it ourselves and showcasing that it is fun. And then hey, dad does this, or the neighborhood guys are out doing this. I think that's a really good way to do it, rather than just say, hey guys, go play. Like, now that could work to an extent, but when they see people who they respect doing it, and that was how it was where I grew up. I had kids older than me that I would go down to our local basketball court and play with, and I idolized those guys. You know what I mean? They weren't even that good at basketball players, but they were way older than me. I saw them doing things, and it made me want to do those things because I saw them doing it. And I don't think, I think so many people are like really hard on prior generations and always call them soft and always call, they don't do this anymore. But it's like times are changing, right? There's some that are still doing it. We have to find the ones who are still doing it and find why they're doing it and try to replicate that in those scenarios,
I think there's an element of truth. I think the problem is we don't define softness in the correct manner. I would say if we're defining softness in terms of having the skill sets to persevere, overcome our emotions. I would say previous generations are better at that than mine. Like your generation is better than mine, even though we're a decade apart. We're not that far. I'll say my parents is better at that. Now, that's not necessarily to say it's a healthier version, but I would say a more productive version. I would say each generation before us. Now, what is the pros and cons of everything that happens is as technology accelerates, kids these days have to deal with social media. Parents might even be worse with social media than kids in terms of comparison and looking at what everyone else is doing and keeping up with the Joneses. And that's where that parents feel they have to pay for everything and outsource everything because they look and they see, Billy down the street has 7 different trainers going to all these different things. And he's having, some type of, I call it artificial success at a young age. And they don't know how to deal with all that. Mm-hmm. And they're learning just as much as the kids are navigating the social media space, the training space. I do want my kid to have athletic success. What is the proper and healthy way to do this? And there's no playbook for that for parents. Yeah. So they're navigating the space just as much as the kids are. Plus, you look at the evolution of what work has become. I would even say 15, 20, 30 years ago, there was more single parent working, parents staying at home. With the change in economics in the world, you have more parents who are both working, less parents at home to spend time with kids going out and doing things. And it's really challenging to find this correct balance of how do we create free play? How do we create an environment for our kids to have athletic success without making it, if you don't make it to the NFL or the MLB, you're a failure. And there's all these different pulls and levers that are putting stress on families and kids that few people have found success in navigating that space. And this is a space I'm learning to navigate with 2 young daughters. By the time this comes out, God willing, my wife has a safe delivery. I'll have 3 kids where I'm learning this space as well as a parent, how to navigate the emotions, the training, the free play, the playing with others, the adversity that comes with it, and curating the necessary lessons that my kids need to learn for not even just sports, but in life, that's going to put them in the best place to have success long term.
Yeah. I think for me, it comes down to, giving parents, if I was to give a parent advice on this, and my advice, my sons are both too young for this right now, but it's like, what are your expectations with your son or daughter? Like when they're 18
That's
years
a great
old,
question.
where
the expectations.
where do you, and it's not like you can ask them. It's like realistically, like what do you think could happen here? And what are your goals? You know what I mean? And I think as parents, mom and dad or guardians getting with each other and kind of figuring out, okay, this is what we want to accomplish, with this youngster. And I think that's where the waters get muddied because people don't really know. You know what I mean? Like, and it's hard to know. And it's not like you have to have a full proof plan and follow it to a T. But I do think, like you referenced, keeping up with the Joneses or Kardashians or whoever you're trying to keep up with. It's like, yeah, I see my neighbor takes, and I'm making this up. Say my kid's 10 and my neighbor's 10, and he sends his kid to go get batting lessons. I have to make a choice. Like, okay, does that make sense for what my goals are for my son? Can he learn something there that I can't teach him at home? And I think that's something that I'd love for parents to start asking themselves, right? Fortunately, I do see a lot of young athletes in, my businesses where, the kids are going to places to train and they don't have the most basic foundations yet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you shouldn't be taking batting lessons or throwing lessons if you can't, like, if I stand away from my son and I'm 15 yards away and he can't throw me the ball 15 times in a row, it's probably a good indicator of you shouldn't send your kid to lessons. You know what I mean? Like if I have my son hitting off of a tee and he can't just hit the ball 15 times. I'm just making this up, but I think too many parents pawn it off immediately, like I referenced earlier. But that goes back to the expectations of what you want out of your son. I would say most, a lot of the best athletes in the world, and parents, compare they think their kids are better than they are, rightfully so. I mean, that's okay. As long as you're not, going to lose your mind over that maybe someday not being true. You should always believe in your kid and stuff like that. I just think it's an individual thing, man, and it's challenging. But you just have to, you really just have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence to be a parent, coach. There's administration. There's so much stuff that you have to do, and sometimes it's a challenge to do all that, man.
One of the best leadership advice I ever got was, as a leader, as a coach, or whatever, and it translates to parenting, is you are not trying to make your players or your kids you're trying to make them a better version of themselves. And we have all these dreams and aspirations for my kids. I know I certainly do. I frequently say I want my girls to golf because that's the quickest way to a female scholarship. I don't want to pay for college.
Yeah.
And so that's where I have to rationalize my own expectations and the things that I desire for my kids. They may not want that. And I have to help guide them and give them the guiding principles to choose their own path, live their own path, and find their ways to do those things. And Greg Olson talks about this, and it's one of my favorite things I've heard someone say. And he says with his kids, obviously his kids are going to have higher expectations. He's Greg Olson. And he says, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you play sports. I don't care if you're in the band. I don't care if you're an artist. But whatever you do, we're going all in with. You're going to learn the principles of working hard, overcoming failure, going through adversity. You're going to give it your all. You're not just going to sit there and do nothing. Whatever it is that you choose to do, it's like, if it's baseball, great, we're all in, let's go. If it's basketball, great, we're all in, let's go. If it's painting, great, we're all in, let's go. And I think that is a really, really good lesson to anyone. Is it's less about what you choose to do and more about how you choose to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the unique thing about that is, it's like, okay, say, your son or your daughter, she wants to get into basketball. Probably the best thing that she could do as a youngster is not only just play basketball. So, you know what I mean? Like, you have to give them a lot of different options, and I get that question a lot. Like, when should kids transition to their main sport and different things like that? And that's such a loaded question, right? If you go to a small school, it could be like, for me, I went to a smaller school. So I played 3 sports all the way up till my senior year. Now that I coach at a bigger school, I could see a lot of benefits of playing. I'm a big believer, for the most part, playing multiple sports up until you're in junior high, but once you get older, and you really are starting to figure out, okay, hey, I'm good at this, I want to go play college sports. I think that's a time where, it may make some sense to drop some sports off if you have the resources to do that. And what I mean by that is, say like you're at a high school and say, you want to focus on basketball. Okay. You're a really good basketball player. You're getting recruited a little bit, but you always played football. By not playing football, are you going to be able to have somebody help you along that way? Or are you just not going to play football and do nothing and then play basketball? You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of parents and kids don't understand. Like, yeah, I do think it's beneficial to switch to play one sport or maybe 2 sports as you get, junior, senior year, or even sophomore. But like, you have to have a plan for the seasons that you're no longer being a part of. There's so many like skewed, like, of those statistics. Most NFL players played multiple sports, and I'm a lot of times they're literally freaks. So yeah,
that's the nuance of it. And this is why the conversation to me is very nuanced, because I talk about this with Tim a lot. And should kids play multiple sports at a young age? Absolutely, yes, 100%. I think the relative science or data that I've seen is unequivocally yes. It develops different skill sets that we've talked about already. Where I don't know and where I want to learn more is like, what is that pivot point to start transitioning to more of a specialization? Because for me, it always comes back to my concern as an athlete is because I played 3 sports all throughout high school. and obviously a relative athletic profile, like was more like I was a high level athlete. Okay. And so you can make the argument I played all three because I was a high level athlete. I still argue that there's a lot of, even at the high school development level, that contributed to me being a better football player because I played baseball, because I played basketball, and those transition of skills. Now, to be fair, again, going back to the nuance of the conversation, football's not a really high skill sport. A lot of it is just athleticism, and obviously, there's fine tuning and learning different skills and techniques. But for the most part, the more athletic you are, you're probably going to have a lot of success. But sports like golf, sports like wrestling, sports like tennis, baseball, these higher skill sports, basketball. When do you start sacrificing some of those, again, I call them free play skills, for some of the more specialized constructed skills in order to evolve as an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally you should always be refining those specialty skills, like as a youth, right? But I would say like once you get into ninth freshman year, something like that, I would think. I mean, you reference wrestling, and I never wrestled. I haven't even been around wrestling really, but I will say this. I mean, you want to talk about developing a young athlete, have them wrestle because it makes them tougher. It just makes them learn how to work hard. A lot of times wrestling coaches are tough guys, which I love for sport for little kids. And then for even gymnastics is phenomenal. Some of the best athletes I've ever seen wrestled and did gymnastics when they're younger, both male and female. So that's what I plan on hopefully getting my kids in with. Because and then as they get older, like football is a weird sport. Like you don't really need to even play football. You know what I mean? Like especially like little, like say you're a little chubby, you have a little chubby kid. What benefit does he have playing offensive lineman? Like butting heads with somebody? Like, dude, if you want to teach that kid how to be a better offensive lineman, get him into wrestling and have him play basketball. I mean, he will get every single developmental skill out of that without having the risk of button heads with somebody at a young age. Yeah, I mean, and then baseball is a little different because it's so specialized, and you'll see that with baseball. With the kids, they usually kind of specialize in that younger because those skills don't always translate to other sports as much. Like you might see, a baseball player and the kid can't jump, he can't really run fast, but he's a damn good baseball player, and I think that that's a skill that is probably super specialized. But again, those same kids, when to maximize development for a baseball player, if the kid plays basketball when he's grown up, if the kid does other multiple sports with hand-eye coordination, whatever that might be, even golf, right? As he gets older, I think that those skills will help him actually raise his ceiling up a lot more higher than it would be if he purely just hit through, fielded, stuff like that. But yeah, I'm a big believer in wrestling and gymnastics, man. And then track and field, I'm always a big believer in too. You can't teach, so many of the best offensive linemen, defensive linemen in the NFL, or all of them, if you just look at their athletic history anymore, a lot of them were basketball players. A lot of the linemen were tight ends. A lot of them were the interior D linemen and stuff were wrestlers. And I think that, those are traits that can definitely help out a lot, and learning that when they're younger is very, very beneficial.
Baseball is one of those sports right now, particularly in the youth sector, that is one of the most discussed elements right now. AAU, the specialization at an early age, kids throwing as hard as they can from the time that they're 10 till whenever they finish playing.
Well, again, like that's my thing, is to ask parents, what do you want out of them? Right? If you have a son who pitches all the time and his arm is killing him, why? Like, what do you want him to do? Like, if you want him to be a really good little league player, if that's where his ceiling is and that's what you want, just for him to be the best one and for you to hang your hat on that, great. But like, if you want him to actually develop, who in their right mind could say that that's a good recipe, right? And I think kids now play so many games that they become desensitized to losing. That's why, high school coaches and stuff get so mad. Like, these kids don't even care anymore. It's like, well, dude, they lost all off season. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they lost hundreds of games this year, potentially. If you're counting, say, a basketball player and he played AAU, he did a spring league, he played in a summer league, he went to camps, he did a fall league. You know what I mean? Like, maybe not hundreds of games, but they lost a lot. So why is he going to care? Right. I'm a big believer in, like, I think it's Rocky 2, where Mickey says, like, he asks him how much you have to ask Rocky how much he has to train for a fight. And it's like, I forget how many minutes he says, but it's like so many more minutes than a boxing match would last. Right. And it's very true to all sports. Right. You know what I mean? You have to earn the right to participate in sports. And then I think and that's why football is, I think people gravitate to, because you don't play football games any other time. So those games mean a lot more to you because there's 10 a year, probably at the minimum. And then if you have success, you could play more. But I think that's why it's become the most popular sport in the United States, purely because of that. You can't play it all the time. It's the carrot at the end, but yeah, I think kids are really desensitized to losing because of their lack of preparation and too much gameplay, personally.
Do you not? I'm assuming you don't like the AAU circuit then, or like, how do you fix that?
Yeah, I like the AAU circuit if it's used to make you a better player, right? So, like, say you're going to an AAU tournament this Saturday, and say you're with your team and you practice all week on, these are the things we're going to get better at this week, and then you have an opportunity in the game to work on what you just trained on, right? Or say in the off season, say it's your junior year, you're not really, say you're a big man, but you play like a guard. But coaches are telling you in college, and your high school coaches are saying, like, look, you got to start working on your big man moves. You're going to be you're a power forward in college. These colleges want to see more out of you. So if you go to an AAU tournament and you just play like how you normally played, that doesn't help you. But if you use that time to train a skill in an actual game, I think that's where games can be really beneficial. But if you do that, right, you have to be willing to not necessarily win the game, right? And as you get older, the thing with AAU is the more you play, the better exposure you could potentially get. But with little kids, I mean, I don't know how much it matters if you win all these trophies. I mean, I've won so many trophies when I was a kid. I mean, I probably had 75 trophies. I threw them all away like a year ago. I'm like, what do I do with these? They're literally worthless. The only thing I can remember from these tournaments is what me and my friends did in between the games, where the games were at. I couldn't tell you how I played or anything like that. I could tell you if my parents fought on the way there, on the way back, and that's about it. You know what I mean? Like, that's all you're going to remember, right? You're not going to remember actually winning. And sometimes, I mean, I guess sometimes you could, but for me, it's just about the experience. People say, like, you always remember how people make you feel. You might not remember how exactly what they say. It's more about how you felt when you were around them. And I always kind of felt like that when I looked back at my athletic career. Man, my senior year of football, yeah, we won some games, but it was just so fun being around the guys and this and that, So, but yeah, it's so many of the ways you can look at this, man, are so, like, intricate too. You know what I mean? But I think it all comes back to when you're making choices for your kids or for your teams or young kids you care about. It's like, what are you making these choices for? And just always follow kind of a blueprint. Okay, I want him to play in college someday. And if you and if the parents are both athletic and played sports and were really good, then you got something to work with. But if the parents are two unathletic people, I mean, that never really. And the thing is, when I say they don't have parent, and this is a common thing people mess up, because I see people say this all the time. The parents didn't have to be good at sports for the kid to be good at sports. The parents, a lot of times, had to be athletic, though. You know what I mean? Like, so, dude, there's so many people that I know that weren't good at sports. Like, I'm thinking of my one friend right now in high school. He wasn't very good at sports, but he was a very good athlete, and he could have been very good at sports. So, like, that's kind of a big determining factor in what a kid's athletic potential could be. Now, they could, get different genes from different parts of their family or whatever, but for the parents, for the most part, are going to determine how tall a kid is, how fast they can get, how high they can jump. And it's just how it works, right? But just knowing what your kid could potentially do and then guiding them to that way, when they're young, it's on you. When it's older, it's on you and them, right? Putting them in a position and asking them the questions. Hey, are you still having fun doing this? And it's hard though, man. It's definitely not an easy thing to do.
The thing you keep coming back to is know what you're doing it for. We as humans underestimate the power of genetics. We just do. You can't control your genetics. You can't control your kids' genetics. So it has to be done from a higher purpose standard. What are we ultimately looking to achieve? And I can only speak for how I view my own kids is I want my kids to develop the skills necessary to endure the ups and downs of athletics, the ups and downs of life, and then let their genetics play through. I want my kids to learn the importance of what it's like to have a work ethic, what it's like to have commitment, sacrifice, what it's like to overcome loss, adversity, to what it's like to navigate that comparison space. We all compare as much as we don't want to, and we can get really good at minimizing what we compare to, but navigating that comparison space, navigating, hey, I have a goal and a dream and a desire. I'm going to chase that. What happens when I fail? And learning to navigate those things as gracefully as possible. And youth sports has gone from that to how can we take all of our kids and make them professional athletes? Mm-hmm. I believe personally, if your goal is to make your kid a professional athlete, you are failing your kid from the beginning. And your kid's genetics will play out. They will determine probably 90% of their athletic careers. It's that final 10% that I do my best, and I fail. I mean, my daughter's 4, and I've certainly failed her already in that space. And I'm going to fail consistently over the next however many years that she plays sports. But to keep that the focus of honing on the skills, the mental, emotional skills that I can really do a higher impact on than the physical stuff. Now, that's why I say some of it's genetic. She loves hitting the golf ball. She loves playing sports. She'll wake up in the morning and be like, Daddy, can we watch golf today? Daddy, can we watch soccer? Some of that sure is because I've showed interest there, like you articulated earlier, but there's a genetic component. My 18-month-old doesn't really care to play with sports right now. My daughter, now my 4-year-old at 18 months did. I don't know what it was. I don't know what the heck I did. I treat them both the same. Yeah. And we can't ignore the genetics part, but we can only really control and influence what I say the important things. And that's where the AAU circuit to me draws concerns, because I don't believe, like you said, we're doing it with proper expectations or with an actual goal or structure in mind. And I think about when I played AAU baseball, I loved AAU baseball. It was fun. Yes, there was a competitive element. We wanted to win. I hated struggling. I hated losing. But like you said, what I remembered was going back to the hotel after and running around the parking lot with my friends. Yeah. You remember the stuff in between, and that's what gets lost is that element of fun and joy. Not everything needs to be life or death. And I think that's the problem with the AAU circuit is not necessarily all of the games. It's the pressure put on each one of these games as if it's life or death.
Yeah. And I think that the best AAU programs, the best programs in general, have coaches that want to actually develop the players that they have, and know how to develop them, and aren't going to ask them or put them in positions that, they're not comfortable in. Know what they need to work on, whether it's baseball, whether it's 7-on-7 or because 7-on-7 gets roasted. And
how do you feel about 7-on-7?
I'll say this about 7-on-7, man. If I was in high school, I'd absolutely love 7-on-7. I would have loved to play because I was obsessed with doing that. It just looks. I mean, it gets kind of crazy sometimes, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? I thank God every night I'm not a 7-on-7 coach. But because that's just you're in the mix. When you do stuff like that with parents and recruiting and stuff. I think I give those guys a lot of credit. They're good dudes and stuff. But that's hard, man. But I would love to play. And I think it's if you play 7-on-7 for the right reasons, you can be a better football player in the off season when you do that. You know what I mean? And I think more high schools need to go to 7-on-7s as a team to work on things that in actual plays and stuff that they could put into motion. I think that would be really, really beneficial. Quarterbacks working with their actual receivers and running as much real football as you can. I was going to say,
are you running real route concepts? Are you running real defensive steps?
I think it's also fun to go to a tournament with a bunch of random dudes you don't know and meet some people and have fun. You know, as an older guy, I think it's so easy to get on that kind of stuff. But I think about myself as a younger guy, man, how much fun would I have had doing that, you know? But again, like if those coaches are in the right, realm of developing the athletes, great, and it just goes back to that with all sports, and I don't want to come off as someone who like doesn't value winning and losing. Like, I mean, ask anybody, I am ridiculous with that. It's bad. I've ruined a lot of relationships with people in my life because of that. I'm the first one to fist fight someone if I'm playing a pickup game and they say it's 7-5 and it's 7-6, but as I get older, I start to realize, when you're coaching young kids, it's different. You know what I mean? Like, and now certain kids, you could coach like differently, but you got to get to know the kids. We talked about this last time. You got to get to know the parents. I think that's probably the hardest thing. And I was talking to one of my best friends. He coaches my high school's like, one of the younger teams over there. And he's like, the hardest thing is dealing with the parents. It's like, they're delusional. They don't understand, what this is like to be a coach. They don't, and a lot of times for parents they don't go to practices, right? They don't know that their kid just doesn't know the plays and stuff like that. And then they want them to play more. And I don't know what's right really for them, like for the kids. Like, do you, is it, and this is so individual again, it's like, do you bench kids who just don't know anything? Do you put them in and let them fail for them to learn? Because like you reference, making, your daughter more mentally resilient. What's the path to do that? Is it by saying, okay, you messed this up, next play, you got to do this? Or is it saying you messed up one time, go sit and watch? Every kid is so different, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge with coaching them is dealing with their parents and getting them to understand, like, I'm doing my best. I'm not Vince Lombardi. I'm not, Phil Jackson here. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just, I'm the one who's in charge, trust me. I care about everybody. This is my way of doing it. And the benefit of that is next year when the kid gets a different coach, maybe it's a totally different coaching philosophy. So what you're referencing stands true. Like, look, this the way this guy did it. Now this is the way this guy did it. So hopefully someday when you have a job or when you're a parent or when you go through a hard situation, you've been around different things that has prepared you for this moment. And that's what sports is about, right?
Yeah, so it comes back to kind of those guiding principles, because not every player, not every parent, not every coach is going to get along, see eye to eye. And I think as a coach, when you're in those spots, you have a responsibility, and you also have you have to understand that comes with the territory. Parents, in my opinion, back when I played as a high school athlete, as a college athlete, as a youth athlete, and now as I am a parent, parents are the worst.
Yeah.
The absolute, there is no understanding. There is no meeting guys where they're at and understanding. Coaches have a bunch of different personalities, whether it is youth or whether it is high school, college, that they are learning to navigate and pull different levers. And the younger in age you are, the less resources and people you have around you to pull the proper levers.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is like you bring in the question, do you bench a kid? Like, what do you do? Like, I'm navigating a space with my 4-year-old. She is terrified to even like go out and play like on a soccer field. So like when it's just me and her, she wants to do everything. When she's with other people, she cries. We lead the league in tears shed. I'm telling you, we lead the league in the amount of tears from a single person. And so I'm trying to pull every different lever with her,
yeah, right.
Whether it's strict, whether it's, hey, it's okay, whether I pick her up and hold her when she comes off where I'm like, no, you got to go stand out there and just cry. And other parents, when it's coaches learning to navigate their kid, have to give grace there,
Yeah.
because you, as your own parent, as a parent of your own child, don't know what levers to pull all the time.
Yeah, and I think that that's why, youth sports would be way more beneficial if you had all the coaches didn't have kids in the team. Now it's hard to find that.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate to have that for whatever reason when I was growing up. Very few of my coaches had kids, and they were normal, good dudes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they had our best interest, and I think that really helped out. And I think that that's always, from a parenting perspective, dealing with someone who doesn't have kids in the team, if your kid isn't playing, is a lot different than if your son's in there and he maybe does a bad play and you're like, oh my, why is he in there? You second guess a lot. I go back a lot to like, I always think about like what shaped me. Why am I the way I am? And we talked about this a little before. It's like, I think one big thing for me was my dad, how he treated me and coaches. And like I said, my dad pretty much when I turned 5 years old, my dad used to just say, this is TG2. He's the next phase of me. He's gonna, you know what I mean? Like, and he that's what he, everywhere I went, he's putting, look how big his hands are. Look at his abs. Like, because I think my dad probably didn't achieve all he could have in athletics. And, he pushed me to do my best, and he did a good job, and he did it in a way that made me want to do it. I was always fearful to let him down, because he instilled in me that it meant a lot to him that I was good, and I didn't want to let him down. Right. But like one thing he did really good with coaching, my dad never coached me. He was a good coach at home. Like he taught me all the basics, but what he used to do is he would walk up to the coach. I remember him doing this in Pee Wee football, walking up to the coach, Little League baseball, basketball. He did the same thing. He'd walk up and say, hey, I'm Terry Grossetti. This is my son, Terry Jr. He said, anything you need to do with him, do. Treat him as bad as you need to. If you need me, I'll be in the outfield, and you'll never hear me say a word. He said, because if I hear somebody say anything negative about him, I'll come down here and I'll kill him. And it's a good point. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think, my dad, sometimes with social stuff, you might not be able to articulate his words great, but I think back on what an executive way to handle your kid. You know what I mean? What a professional way to identify because how many parents fight over people talking stuff on their kids all the time? You know what I mean? It even happens in high school, so for him to just take himself out of it, introduce him and just say, pretty much destroy him. I'm on your side. Play him if he's good. If he's not, don't. I think that's a really good kind of a blueprint for parents to follow. Stay away from the action. My dad used to sit in the farthest spot you could sit in a lawn chair, bring a 6-pack of beer and just sit there. You know what I mean? And I think that staying out of that, like you can do whatever you want with your kid at home and this and that, but sometimes, like, I'm not saying for a 4-year-old, I mean, I was 8 at this time or maybe older, it's just like, let them figure it out then, you know what I mean? And then reassess. Another thing he used to do is probably why I love black and white talk so good was my dad had a ledger and he used to keep track of every single game I played. And he would write down like, okay, what I did at bat. First bat, second bat, like struck out, base hit. And after the game, he'd be like, you're 1 for 4. This is what we need to work on. You know what I mean? Like, and it was just, that's what I worked on that week. Or, hey, you missed 5 foul shots. You had 20 points, but you missed 5 foul shots all week. You're going to work on, you know what I mean? Like, I thought, looking back, what a good way to kind of like coach your kid, and like I said, I know that how much he loved me. So I was so fearful to let him down. You know what I mean? And I think that having a coach like that in your life is critical. And I think we referenced that last time on here too. Like my high school basketball coach played a huge role in my life. I was scared to let him down. I didn't want to play good. I just didn't want to play bad. You know what I mean? Like it was just because I wanted him to be proud of me. You know what I mean? Like, and there was just certain people like that in my life that like I knew believed in me. And I think that as parents, you develop that with a kid when they're at home, and that's what you're doing right now with your daughter. So eventually when you go out there, she'll say, Daddy, I got this. You stay over there. And that'll be a very proud moment for you. You know what I mean? But it takes a lot of stuff at home to get to that point. It doesn't just happen,
I can't wait till the day I can just go stand out in the outfield or whatever, just far away and not, because I don't want to be a crutch. That's the last thing I ever want to be. But I talk with my wife a lot. Like, do I want to coach? Do I want to coach my kids? And that comes, well, one, I actually know the answer. I don't want to. But my fear comes from, do I really want some of these other people? And I'm not talking about specifically now, I'm talking about more when I was a kid. The types of coaches that go out there and coach kids, that don't teach them the right fundamentals, that don't teach them the actual proper way to play sports and are more there for their kids. Dude, youth football, our warm up, we would line across from each other, grab each other's chest plates, and headbutt each other.
Yeah.
That's how we warmed up. We wanted to get our heads and necks ready for contact. And I think about that now as a kid, and I think about, some of these other parents who are keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with Kardashians. And I'm like, is that who I want coaching my kid? Or do I want to be either, not that I'm Mr. Everything, but like have the right goals in place? And that's to develop young girls and boys into becoming better people and more resilient, to just put a label on it. And that's something I really struggle with, at home. And a big deterrent for me is, going back to the parent side of things, is I don't want to navigate every kid's parents trying to tell me that their kid is the next great thing. And there's another point that I think is really important, because it's so nuanced with every individual, is that relationship that you had with your coaches or your father, where you didn't want to let them down, because that is a really movable force into changing behavior and action that leads in a productive manner. And I had Justin Sua on my podcast. If you don't know him, you should check out his stuff. It's phenomenal. And he talks about, like, know when a mindset no longer serves you. And that's obviously as you get older and you develop more, is knowing when I can let go of, I don't want to let my parents down or a coach down. And I can transition that into, hey, I want to, make myself proud, or just go out and do my best, whatever the language is, but knowing the mindset shift. And you look at some of the greatest athletes ever, and you look at the stories of their youth, there is an element of like hard coaching. There's an element of, hey, you need to do this, you need to push hard, you need to do this. But it's so challenging with your kids to find the space of what is proper hard coaching and what is, hey, I'm going to put my arm around you.
Yeah. And I think so much of that is it's what do they think of you? You know what I mean? Like you can do anything to anybody if they know you care. You know what I mean? And I think that, like, you could probably look back at your coaches as a youth, like even the guys you were talking about, and all you're going to think about is, like, did they care about me or not?
No.
You know what I mean?
And I can say that emphatically.
So that's what I mean. So, like, I think about my Pee Wee football coaches, and they care about me.
Yeah.
I know they did. You know what I mean? Like, and I respect them to this day because of that. I can think of some teachers in my life who cared about me, and I could just think of some who didn't. You know what I mean? And that's all we're all going to remember at the end of the day. I can't remember, how many carries I got in a Pee Wee football game, but I can tell you if my coach cared about me. And that's all these kids are going to remember eventually anyways. So, and it's the same thing when it comes to parents. It's like, you can do and say whatever you want, just, but as long as you're the same guy that's on Christmas, you're giving him a hug and a kiss and you're saying, I love you so much. Like, you got in the driveway the same day and you beat their ass. You know what I mean? It don't matter. You know what I mean? Like, it just, that's the give and take that it is as a parent, as a parent who wants to develop a tough person. You know what I mean? And like, I think you referenced, not wanting to coach. And that's the worst part about youth sports, is like guys who know it, like the ones who don't know deter the people who do know. What a crazy concept. You know what I mean? Like, there's people who just know nothing that people that actually can come in and help, just don't want to even be around them. And that's something that I'm sure a battle I'll have to, fight eventually. And I don't know what I'll do either, but I do know that I can help out a lot. And I feel like I would be doing a disservice to the kids if I don't, and
that's the tension I struggle with is, do I have a responsibility because of what I do now and what I did throughout my playing career and all the things I've learned? Do I have a responsibility to pass that on to the younger generations and do my best to help and reach as many athletes as I can. That is the number one thing I struggle with is, do I have a responsibility? And part of me hopes that there's someone out there with better experience with youth athletes that I can just kick it to. We go back to, hey, I want to outsource this.
Yeah.
But that is the number one question I ask myself and have yet to answer, that I have to figure out is, do I have a responsibility to pass forward all the things that I've learned and do my best to do it in a healthy manner and reach as many people as possible?
Yeah, I would say you do, if you're asking me. Yeah, I mean, I do think I think anything you have in your life that God has given you that you think that you have the ability to help people with, it is always your responsibility. And now sometimes it's hard, but it's, in that situation, a lot of it would be even coaching the coaches, you know what I mean? Like getting them to understand perspectives, and parents, and I'm sure those are things that I'll have to explore eventually too with my kids, God willing, but I do think it is our responsibility to help people when we can, because if not, somebody else is just going to do it. And I don't know, in terms of X's and O's, I mean, I played a lot of football in my life, but I couldn't tell you anything about how to coach a football game. Like I do strength and conditioning and whatever, but I'm sure I could pick it up pretty quickly. You know what I mean? Especially in youth sports. But we were talking about youth sports a lot, dude. But I mean, in high school, it's parents. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like with the parents, it's like, what, like I always say, like, what do you want, man? Like, what do you think? You know what I mean? Like I told a coach the other day, I said, I would never talk to a parent, but what I would say is I'll be at the field every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. You're more than welcome to come talk to me face to face. And how many people do you think are going to do that? There's a lot of texting, emailing, calling. Okay, well, and then I would just have this is why your kid isn't getting the ball. These are how many times I wrote down he messed up in practice. This is how many, you know what I mean? Like, and just say, so what would you do? Would you play him? Because I want to coach here. And if we lose, I'm going to lose. So, or if we lose, I'm going to lose my job. So, I think that's a good way to put it in perspective for parents personally,
One thing I appreciate that my parents did really well is once I got to a certain age, they did not speak to my coaches. It was, if I had a problem, I spoke to them. Now, I will say when I was younger, I've referenced those poor peewee coaches that we had. There were scenarios where they did go and have words with them, which I learned later in life, didn't know at the time. But it was probably once I got to like 8th grade, they never spoke to my coaches. It was, Colin, you're old enough, you're mature enough. If you have a problem with a coach, you go handle it. Mm-hmm. And that is such one, healthy for the parent to be away from the coaches in that respect. And two, such a healthy developmental skill to learn how to have tough conversations with a coach or a person in power, like as a kid. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to have those conversations, and I had several of them in my high school career, in my college career, on how to approach a coach and talk to them when I felt that something wasn't going right, or from my perspective, and learning whether I liked it or not, that I could have the conversation and get that type of feedback. Mm-hmm. And I give my parents a lot of credit for that, because I'm sure, and I know, just living in my household, there were a lot of times where they wanted to say something but didn't. And they said, Colin, if you want to change it, you got to go have the conversation.
Yeah. No, then that's really good parenting. I mean, that makes sense for sure as you get older, because in college and high school, college, I had the same conversations with coaches, and I like to think that I was prepared for that because I always had to do it too. Your mom or your daddy shouldn't be reaching out to the coaches in high school. You know what I mean? Or in college, it happens.
It's crazy how often, you'd be surprised how often it happens in college.
Yeah.
Even at the Division I level.
I would think it happens insane. In the NFL. Is that it?
Hey, you see professional athletes who have to answer to their parents, like actions.
Yeah.
It happens at that level too.
Yeah.
Which is as an athlete, you can't control all the time, like what your parents or spouses do, or relatives or friends. But like at a certain degree, if I'm a professional athlete and my parent says something on social media, I'm going to my parents, you delete your social media tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a weird world. We live in a very unique time.
You were talking about Pee Wee coaches, and you were like, button heads or whatever for the game. So
every practice.
Well, we played a local team to Pittsburgh, in our area or whatever, semi recently that did one-on-ones before the game. Like wide receiver DB.
I'm talking about like now or when you played?
No, now.
Now.
Like they did one-on-ones before the game. Like a DB, receiver, and quarterback, they were in a line doing one-on-ones against each other. I've never seen that before.
What team was this?
I'm not saying the
team. Tell me off air.
Yeah.
But I feel like I saw a clip of. No, I did see a clip of people doing Bull in the Ring before a game as well. Is this the same team?
I don't know. I didn't see that. I was a big Bull in the Ring maniac though back in the day. I used to just destroy people.
Subtle flag.
Yeah.
I saw it on Twitter. I'm pretty sure it was McKeesport. I don't know that to be factual.
We've never played them. So.
I don't know if that's certain. So if I throw McKeesport, I will apologize if it wasn't you. I'm pretty sure they were doing Bull in the Ring before a game. You're the strength and conditioning guy. Is there benefit to that?
I mean, no. Yeah. I mean, I do, we do some like manual neck work prior to the games.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, but we don't do any hitting like that kind of stuff. I mean, they'll do O-line, D-line work, and just to kind of get the pads thumping, I think that's beneficial. But to hit someone when they're not looking, and
my thing, like you look at the famous or infamous, depending on where you fall on the line here, in the movie Miracle or whatever with Herb Brooks when they're doing the conditioning after the game
again.
And they're in a training phase in that period of time. My thing is, once you get to the season, if you are trying to instill toughness in your team by doing Bull in the Ring before a game, you've probably lost that ability to develop that type of toughness in your team. It is probably too late to think a Bull in the Ring before the game is going to make your team tougher and more prepared, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I would, toughness is something that's, I like to think is trained in a lot of ways, not just through hard, like physical activities too. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I didn't really think anybody did Bull in the Ring anymore, to be honest with you. You saying Bull in the Ring, I haven't thought about it in like 20 years.
I'm pretty sure it was Bull in the Ring. It was Bull in the Ring or Oklahoma. Pretty sure it was Bull in the Ring.
Where the guy stands in the middle and there's a circle and you send the dude
and they hit him. I think it was, granted, I didn't spend a lot of time watching the video, read the caption, saw the thing, and was like, hey, to each their own, right? But,
right. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it personally. But I do think there is an element of, before a game, getting your players in that mental state. But I think there's definitely safer ways to accomplish that. Yeah.
I think, I go back to, identity, which is everything that I focus on is like the identity of the person, the identity of the team is, are you the type of person who does X, Y, or Z? Are you the type of team that when it's tough in the fourth quarter, you're going to persevere through? You may not succeed all the time, but you're going to, do the fundamentals. You're going to not quit. You're going to give your maximum effort. Are you the type of team and people that do that? Mm-hmm. And then what are your processes? What are your systems that enable you to become that type of person or that type of team? And really creating those and working from like a top-down level. Okay, what does success look like if you're talking about high school on Friday nights if you're a football team? What does success look like to you and how do we work back?
Mm-hmm.
What does ultimate failure look like and how do we work back and avoid those things? If everything goes wrong, what are those three things? And then how do we put together plans and processes for those?
Yeah, that's just that Atomic Habits thought process. You read that book?
I have read it.
Yeah, that's
multiple times.
Yeah, so it's like, and you're in the off season. You want to, everybody's saying, I want to win a championship. Instead of talking about winning a championship, pick 5 things this off season we're going to get better at. Right? By the season, we don't want to have any personal foul penalties. How are we going to develop that? in the off season. Because if you develop that skill or mental capacity to not overreact to things, you're going to have a better chance to winning a championship. And you want to be more conditioned than anybody. You want to be, you know what I mean? And pick 5 things, never talk about winning a championship. You play the season, you win a championship because you did those 5 things, you know? And I think that that's a really good way to look at stuff in all walks of life.
You talked about winning and losing earlier and the importance. And winning and losing does matter. I will always be of the mindset like winning and losing does matter. But the younger you are, as you progress and mature and evolve as a person, it is more about learning, again, the necessary skills to, whether you win or lose, persist anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And understand that just because you win doesn't mean you did it because of the right systems or processes, or because you lose, you had the wrong ones. And it is really hard to develop that sense of awareness and skill. But that's why it's all the more important at a young age to focus on things that are more controllable or things that you can influence.
Oh, yeah.
Like I can't always influence, or I can't always control the outcome, but I can influence it, right? If I'm I'll pick football again because it's easy. If I'm a corner, okay, which is what I was, I cannot single-handedly determine whether or not we win or lose a game. I can't always single-handedly determine whether or not I play a great game. But here's what I can control. I can control understanding what are the key formations that the opposing team runs. What are the key personnel that they run? When they're in different personnel sets or different formations, what plays are they more likely to run? When it's third down and short, what are their go-to plays? When it's third down and long, what are their go-to plays? Who are their go-to players? What moves do they like to make? How are their running mechanics? How do they sit in their breaks? Understanding all these different things, right? Hey, did I watch enough film this week? Was I fully intent and focused on each rep in practice? Was my focus at a maximum high? Those are things that I can control that influence outcomes, that influence whether or not I grade out at a high level or not. And when you can focus on the inputs, then the outputs become a byproduct.
Yeah.
And then when my outputs are not where I want them to be, then I can go back to my inputs and be like, what do I need to change? And so then I can say winning, yes, is of utmost importance, but a singular win or a singular good game is going to fade by pretty quickly. And then I need to re-enlist those inputs again.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I think that that's something that, you know, every coach should really be implementing in some scale, you know, and you would think the best are, you know, I mean, I would assume that's a thought process that goes through the best of the best, you know.
I don't know. I think you've probably learned too. Some of these even programs, you know, professional organizations are pretty poor.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like you just said, you know, some of the most winning don't. It's not always like wins and losses aren't always a byproduct of that. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's some unbelievable Division I programs that the coaches are going to get fired at this year that are doing an unbelievable job and they're just not winning.
Yeah.
But if you kept the systems in place for years and they could recruit the right people to fit their systems because they don't give them long enough time, they could actually have a lot more success.
Was it you that, I'm pretty sure it was you that said some of these guys are just, who was it? It might not have been you that said some of these guys, I think it was actually Tom Brady, are just physical education people who are now thrust into these leadership roles who don't know how to develop athletes. You've said something similar on here, is like, this is what I'm good at. I didn't know all of this came with being good at this.
Yeah. I've talked about that when it comes to like business before. You know, I'm a strength coach and I have a business, but I'm not a business guy.
Yeah.
So sometimes those are areas that I struggle with because I didn't really intend on my business training and doing all these things when I started. Now it's something you want and, you know, but like you want it till it happens and you're like, well, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I develop my staff? How do I schedule things right? Because those are things you're not really good at. You didn't become relevant because of knowing those things. Yeah, but I would think that happens quite a bit with football. And to be honest, that probably happens a lot with players who were good, who then become coaches because they don't really know why they were good. They don't really know how to prepare like a coach. I mean, coaching is so hard, man. Like preparation and all your thought process. I mean, those guys sit at the facility for 14 hours a day, man. You know what I mean? Going through every little scenario every, personnel and plays and everything, and a lot of former players don't really grasp that.
There's a lot of really, for lack of a better term, dumb former players. Like you see people in the media like talk about, hey, like you have to be a former player to know the sport. And I think there is an element of truth to that, which is probably a controversial thing to say. But there's a lot of former players who are really dumb and don't know the game and don't understand X's and O's and don't understand why certain things happen. And not that, knowing X's and O's is the only thing that makes you qualified to speak on the sport, but knowing the systems processes that end up explaining why people are good or why there are good teams. There are a lot of athletes in sports who are just so supremely talented and athletic that they win in spite of the systems and processes they have in place for themselves.
Yeah, and coaching requires so much discipline. I mean, and just the ability to react and have a kind of a lot of book smarts, and just players are pretty dumb, man. Like, it's not like a negative thing.
Yeah.
They're really, really good at playing the sports. They're really fast. They're really athletic. I would much rather probably be them than the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, but
I gotta stop saying dumb. Ignorance, I think, is a better way to put it.
Yeah. They're just ignorant to what it takes to prepare athletes, because them preparing themselves didn't take as much effort. And I think scouting is really, really hard. A lot of former players will get into that and realize, dang, like this is pretty challenging. There's a lot to do with those things. Those are full-time jobs, and there's a lot of mistakes you can make that really come back and bite you, So yeah, former coaches probably aren't the best, but some are unbelievable. The ones who can do both, like I think guys like D'Amico Ryans, who I know a lot of people think very highly of him, like John Lynch as like a GM. Mike Tomlin. There's a lot of guys. They don't really have the, and it's unique because guys like Bill Belichick and stuff, and he didn't really play football at a high level, but he could coach it at a high level. That's probably for another conversation, how they could get there,
What are your thoughts on here in the Pittsburgh area? We've had a few high schools recently reach out to other schools and request a running clock from the start. What are your opinions on schools doing that?
I had a tweet that said, what's going to happen when the team who asked that wins? Because that could actually happen. Because you kick an onside kick. I don't know if they're actively, because if you were to do that, your game plan would drastically change. You know what I mean? It would be all onside kicks. If you're trying to win the game, that's why I don't understand. Like, I don't really get it. I don't think, like, can you still win?
Yeah,
you can still win.
I would assume.
Yeah, if you can still win, like, I mean, even if you're outmatched a little bit, why not do it? I mean, the other team's going to say no, probably, I guess. You know what I mean? But, like, I don't know. It definitely muddies the waters on what serious competition is, with Western Pennsylvania being such a, well, I think we like to think it's really good in football. In reality, lately, it hasn't been, in the nation.
Used to be.
Yeah, it used to be really good. And it's still solid, but in comparison to a lot of the other people, like, and if you look at like the national top 50 teams, I know nobody in Western PA is going to be on there. But you'll have some teams from the Philly Catholic League on there, and that's really it, probably. I mean, unless some of these teams around here have like really, really good seasons, which is possible. But I don't know. I mean, I think it definitely hurts. Just the competitive spirit of kids. I think you train all off season long, and, with the players talking about how you're going to win this year. And I think it does all your talking. It gives it no meaning. We're going to do this year. You're going to do this year. And then the second times are going to get really, really hard for you. You say, you know what, this probably isn't for us. Now, if it's a player safety thing, I get it and I don't get it, because you're signing up to play football. You know what I mean? Like, if you have like, I think I saw a team or something had like 11 kids, and they, like, that's kind of a situation where it may make some sense for safety.
What's crazy is the team with 11 players actually played. It was the team that had like 22 that said they couldn't.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like the message that it sends. I think in a world where we referenced earlier about kids being soft, it's really not the kids. If you're a parent willing to do that, you're kind of saying, "Hey, I'm soft. So my kids are going to be soft." Um, yeah, I don't know. What do you think about it?
I'm going to go on a relative, not a rant, but I want to be as articulate as I possibly can. I'm going to speak to the things that I'm ignorant of. Obviously, I'm not in those rooms, in those conversations. I don't understand all the specific details, but of the information that's been related to the public, okay, I feel I can have an opinion on. And I'm not married to opinions, and if someone proves me wrong, reaches out to me, says, you're wrong because of reasons X, Y, and Z, like, hey, I get that. So I'm admitting up front, I'm ignorant to certain parts of the conversation. And I am going to call out schools because it just helps me from a clarity perspective talk through it. So Baldwin is a high school that requested to have a running clock for every single game that they play in the rest of the year. Okay. And so the first thing I think of is, like you just said, what message are you sending to your kids that say, hey, we don't believe in you. We're just going to mercy roll the rest of the year, that your preparation no longer matters, which is a terrible message to send. I think that there is a really strong, important message for life that you can do everything right and sometimes the outcomes still not go your way. We're going to do it anyway. We're going to develop the skill sets to make you guys become young men that is going to serve you well beyond this, right? This is just a vehicle to learn about life, because eventually, I don't care who you are, football ends. Then the second part of that is Baldwin knew the talent level they had for months. Where was this conversation in April, in January? They had to have had some type of belief that they were going to come in and play to win some games. So you're telling me 4 or 5 games through the season, just because your team is getting your teeth kicked in, that all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we want to throw in the towel. It is just, to me, a resounding message of quitting.
Yeah, and I think you're so there's magical things that happen in athletics, right? There's things that have happened in sports that kids literally or people probably think about on their deathbed. This was my greatest moment. Like, I had so much fun. And that's a moment where that could potentially happen for somebody, right? That's a life-changing moment. The underdog story where you shouldn't have won and you thought about, man, are we even going to be able to play the rest of the season? You know what we did, and we came together and we ended up beating this team who nobody thought we were going to beat. And you're stopping the kids from giving them an opportunity to do something like that, because I don't even know who was playing. You said Baldwin, and
I don't know who Baldwin was playing. I just know they're a team that requested running clock the rest of the year.
So they were playing Central Catholic, who's obviously a really good program. They could forever somehow beat Central, and that's something for those seniors. That's their Super Bowl, right? They'll never play in the Super Bowl. That's a chance that they get to do that, and to live out a moment where their back was against the wall and they were resilient and they worked together, and they made it happen. And how many times do you see that in sports? That wouldn't, if Baldwin beat Central this year, that'd be a huge upset. Would that be the biggest upset in the history of sports?
No,
probably not. I mean, that's probably a pretty big lopsided game, right?
But that's the reality, right?
Yeah,
Like, crazy things happen in athletics all the time, but you're also you're depriving the individual athlete from maybe creating a highlight play that they may cherish forever.
Yeah, right. Yeah, or a play that Central traditionally has a lot of really good recruitable players, and say you're a Division III recruit and you get the opportunity to do something against a Division I guy, because the game is lengthened out and you have a great play against them, that maybe that play is a reason why you get a scholarship or something like that, right? You don't really know that. And I think depriving them of that isn't a good idea, I personally.
And maybe the more disheartening one is Fox Chapel. Because, hey, Baldwin is, by all measures, a really bad high school.
Well, the thing with Baldwin is, being from where I'm from, I don't really know a lot of these teams. But Baldwin's been bad recently. But like Baldwin's got
It's
a
a
lot
good
of
high
kids.
school.
They got a lot of good kids. They got a real nice field. I mean, they got a good. It's not like it's out in the
Albert
middle.
Gallatin.
Yeah. It's not like it's out in the middle of nowhere where there's no resources and stuff. Like, they probably have some pretty good coaches, and like I don't
Blows
think
my mind.
Yeah,
In like, I also, like, it is important to say I've never been on a team that's atrocious. Okay, like I don't know what that's like. So I do have to call out. I don't know what it's like to walk into a game knowing that we're going to get beat to smithereens. Like I don't know that feeling. So I empathize in the sense that, hey, I can't relate to what that's like, but I can relate to failure in general and the important elements that you need to overcome failure. But the more disheartening one to me is Fox Chapel. So, they're arbitrary, right? But so Whitfield Insider Carlos Sofko has been on the show. He does a rankings for every classification. Like Fox Chapel's ranked. Like they have players of relative skill and talent. For them to reach, I believe it's to Pine Richland and say, we want a running clock for the game. Like, again, what message are you sending to your kids? A school too that hosts playoff games, and you're talking about like resources. I don't think there may not be a wealthier school district than Fox Chapel, and it is such a failure on the coaches and administration, in my opinion, again, with relevant information that I have, for them to go to Pine Richland, I believe it was Pine Richland, and say, we want a running clock. Because like Fox Chapel beating Pine Richland would not be the greatest upset in the world. That could reasonably, under a maybe 1 out of 100 times, but maybe 2 out of 100 times, could happen.
Yeah.
And for like, I can't imagine as a player, if my coach came to us and said, hey guys, we don't think you can win. Yeah. We're going to ask for a running clock so the beating isn't as bad.
That's one thing I wonder. And yeah, I mean, Pine's obviously always really good too, and they have a phenomenal program, but Fox Chapel, when I think of them, I don't think this is like some dump where you would think they have pretty good stuff. You know what I mean? Like, but like my thing is like, how do you say this to the team? I don't, it for me, it would only make sense if the players almost said it. Like if the players came to me as a coach and said, dude, I would be like, you guys are whatever, you know what I mean? But like, I don't know how in what world it would ever make sense for you to say that to a bunch of young men. You know what I mean? I don't even know how you could articulate the words for that. And to my understanding, I don't know did they even tell them? Like,
I don't know. I think I saw one of the like parents of a kid or a kid say they found out through social media as well, or like it wasn't presented to them, and that they found out the same way basically everybody else did.
Yeah. I don't know how I would. Well, I would never break that news. So sometimes I always do that. Like when I think about stuff, I would never do that. So I don't know how they would do it. You know what I mean? Like I can't even think about how I would do that because I could never do it. So I don't know any of these head coaches. I don't know any of these ADs. If they see this clip or this episode, they may hate me, and that I can move on with my life knowing that those people don't like me. But when you took the head coaching job or the athletic director job, you hold a responsibility. Whether you asked for those responsibilities or not, okay, fair or unfair, you have a responsibility to these young men and women, in this particular conversation, men in football, to give them the best environment to learn and develop. And this goes against everything I believe in terms of developing young men and women through trials, tribulations, adversity. Okay. If people haven't realized, those are really important topics to me because it translates through life. And I don't care who we're playing. As a head coach, there is not a world where I'm asking for a running clock. The running clock's going to happen. Well, that's what I'm saying. There is a running clock. Already.
You get
what I mean? Like, once you get I think it's 35 points, the clock just continuously runs, which that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, you're not going to, you're getting destroyed that bad. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, I see what you're saying, man. I don't know. I don't like it. I'm not. I've been on some bad teams and I've coached bad teams. So like the opposite of you, I've been on some bad ones, man. And that was never like a, you know what I mean? Like, I guess we weren't so bad. We're like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. I don't know how, I also don't know how bad they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you said Fox Chapel's decent. And
Yeah.
Baldwin, we played them. You know, we beat them pretty bad, but they were like good athletes. They,
Yeah.
like the kids were, you know, pretty.
For perspective,
solid.
I'm pretty sure Fox Chapel hung 70 on someone this year. Like they have scored 70 points in a game. I'm almost sure.
I wonder if there's like a deeper thing with that. And I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Like there's information I'm sure I'm ignorant to, but in like the general like with publicly available information, I genuinely cannot understand that we've reached this point. And that goes back to some of our earlier conversations. What's the point in all this? Like, what are you teaching those kids? What message are you portraying to them? Are you giving them? As a coach, like you said, I can't imagine after however many months of training, basically me coming and say, hey, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't sit well with me either. You know, I think that those kind of opportunities as a coach, or if you're really trying to develop young men, women, whatever, I think after that game is a great coaching point to like teach them. We put a lot of work in and it didn't work this time, but that doesn't mean our work was worthless, right? That doesn't mean we're not going to work anymore. We have a lot of things on film that we did good. But we have a lot of bad. Let's look at the bad. Let's get better, right? And move forward for next week. And hopefully this game can be a game that teaches us some things that we wouldn't normally have found out regardless. You know what I mean? And I think that that's probably the way that most coaches would view that. And that's, to be honest with you, you know, that's the way coaches have always viewed that. Like, and that's the way 99.9 I don't know, 99% of coaches are probably viewing that. So the 1%ers, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I can't really understand it. You know, maybe there was pressure from community, or we talked about parents earlier, the things that they can do and say to change the way that we coach and feel and do different things. Maybe there was some pressure there, maybe administrative pressure. I really don't know. You wouldn't think that, you know, you would think the high school coach of the sport would have a lot of pull on those things, and people ultimately would respect his opinion, but we don't know that either. You know what I mean?
And I think about it as well in the sense of people, and I've seen since this transpired, people think of all different types of way to reorganize teams and schools. It wasn't too long ago, Peters Township was terrible. Mm-hmm. Peters Township all of a sudden is perennial in the Whitfield title game.
Yeah.
How many of these districts are actually spending time in youth development? Mm-hmm. How many of these high school football coaches, and again, fair or not, like you sign up for a responsibility at some of these athletic directors, how often are you going around speaking to younger athletes, encouraging them to do different things?
Sure.
You know, how often is the head coach again, I went to Franklin Regional, spending at the, you know, the midget program? You know, are they going down and working with the, you know, 8-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, the 12-year-olds, showing face, speaking, encouraging them, right? Talking about, hey, this is what matters. This is what we're doing. How many of these schools and programs are working on actually creating and fostering an environment for young athletes to thrive and succeed as it trickles through? My guess is probably not many, if at all. And that's where it's like, you want your product to be better on Friday nights, start younger, start earlier, and watch it trickle through over time.
Yeah. And that brings us back to right where we started is, you know, if you're a parent of a kid who you've put a lot of time in with, when it comes to football, you've brought him to practice, you've taught him things as a mom, a dad, a guardian, a grandparent, whatever it is. And, you know, then his coaches cared and they loved him just like you did. And they work with him. And then, you know, do you think those people would be okay with that?
No.
So again, it's just a lack of that kind of development. Do you think the kid would be okay with that? If he had all these people in his life that were prepared him and, you know, played a role in his development to that point? No, the kid wouldn't want that, right? But it's the lack of that that's striking. And who knows? I don't know. I don't know how many kids are on the team. You know, every kid might have said, "I don't want to do this." You know what I mean? I don't.
That's like, even then, like, you know, I don't want to keep beating on this drum here. If I'm a coach of a team and all my kids sign a thing saying, "Hey, we want a running clock," you have, again, a responsibility as the adult in the room to say no. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
Like, no, like, we, you know, if we go out and get our teeth kicked in, then that happens.
Yeah.
Right. But we are not quitting. We are not giving up. We are not walking off this field as quitters. And I just, you know, like, I get upset about it thinking, and that's why I go back to, like, you know, do I have a responsibility coaching? Like, that message, like, I'm not allowing these kids to quit and give up on themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I am, you know, again, like, we're so hard on coaches, and I'm being hard on coaches right now, but, like, coaches have such a major role in developing young athletes.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the hard thing with guys like, I would say, you in general, you know, is you played sports at a high level, you know, a very high level. You're very, very motivated. You're very dialed in. You care a lot. And it's hard to even grasp that there's people like that are going to be, that you're an anomaly in this world when it comes to youth athletics. Most are not like that.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to think how they would think because you're not them. They don't think like you. Like, so all the things that you think and the things who make you you and the things that made you so successful in life and in sports, they have never thought that. So that's why these situations are so hard because they're not like that. You know what I mean? And I would tell that to a lot of my staff when I was coaching in college. Like, why does this kid, we would talk for hours. Why can't we just get this kid to do this? Why? It's like, dude, he ain't like us.
Yeah.
We became coaches enough. We love this sport in this world enough to be a coach for a Division I college. This kid is never going to be able to do that. You know what I mean? Like they can't even think about doing this. They would have no idea how to do it. They're, you know, and we as the chosen ones who have that ability or God-given ability to think that way, sometimes it's really hard not to think critically of everybody. So I always just do my best of living my life in a way that other people hopefully think, okay, this guy gets it, and try to emulate the way that I talk and teach kids. Hopefully they can learn that way because, you know, a lot of them guys, and this isn't even about these coaches. This is just in general. This is coaches everywhere. They just don't have that ability, man. You know what I mean? They didn't take coaches seriously when they played. They didn't take sports seriously when they played. And now they're coaches. And a lot of coaches, unfortunately, ask athletes to do things that they're not physically willing to do or mentally willing to do themselves. And, you know, that's an epidemic across all sports, you know, is you got this coach who's 400 pounds, doesn't do anything physically, yelling at kids to run faster. It's like, dude, why don't you run faster? You know what I mean? Like, why don't you do this then? You know, and what do you think kids think when they get coached by people like that? You know what I mean? And I think that's why it's really important to hold up your end of the deal when you're coaching athletes because they think of that stuff. I sure did.
It's funny you bring that up. I just shared, on my Twitter page, a clip of Brian Kite is his name. He was a guest on here. Really good guest. Talks about that exact thing. And kids these days with social media, they've heard every saying in the world, and they can cut through the BS immediately when you're just saying something and not living it out. And that coaches in general are the epitome of saying one thing, doing another.
Yeah. And it's like, it does it for me, knowing what I know now. There could be a coach who's super overweight, lazy, but is a great coach. I get that.
Yeah.
A lot of, I have friends, great friends that are that exact thing right now. I'm not judging what I think of them. I'm saying, what do the kids think of you?
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what matters for the kids that you're coaching. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, if you're going to teach me how to, swing a golf club and you're like, hey, and you hit and you swing and miss, I'll be like, what? This dude's trying to teach me how to hit the golf ball? Like, dude, I need you to be able to hit it for me to trust you. And it's the same thing with coaches. And I think coaches lose sight of that. I really do.
You bring up a good point because it's less about, so like if you have a 400-pound coach if that 400-pound coach is yelling at you in the weight room and conditioning, probably not going to listen. If he really knows X's and O's and tells you and gives you a real explanation in depth of like, hey, this is why we do this, you're probably going to listen.
Sure.
And it's knowing, having that self-awareness as a coach, where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses? If I'm severely overweight and didn't play at a high level, probably not going to scream at my kids to run harder and try harder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
but I may communicate, hey, I really know this game from an X's and O's perspective, whatever life lessons, and I'm going to communicate the why behind this. Then if you have a really fit coach who's like, let's get in shape, guys.
Yeah.
Carries a little more credence.
Yeah.
And it's knowing where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses, what levers do I need to pull, what coaches do I need to have, relay certain messages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it comes down to, hey, some of us like that get put into coaching roles aren't aware of all those things. And it's finding the best way to create playbooks and systems for people to have the utmost success.
Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah. And that's why I'm always on my staff about consistently training, looking the part, because if you're asking for what we do, it's all that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of why I'm trying to be meticulous with the way I eat and train and all that, just so I have, and I can still demonstrate and stuff like that. I think it's important.
I appreciate you, man. Looking forward to getting you on more often.
Yeah. Yeah.
People want to reach out to you, things you're working on. What do we got going on, Terry?
Not working on anything right now. No, just, just if you want to train and train the right way, I think I'm the guy to go to, if you like being told the things that you need to work on, I'm the guy that will tell you that. We're excited about draft prep this year. We'll have 25, 30 guys moving here in the next, what would it be? 3-4 months from now. It's coming up pretty quickly. So that's something that we're preparing for, but exciting time of year, man.
Thanks, I appreciate you, brother.
Yep.
Thanks for coming on. Listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. Download the pod, subscribe to our YouTube channel. 5 stars only, baby. See you guys next week.